Hello and welcome to this special joint program of the Dickey Center for International Understanding at Dartmouth and the American Academy in Berlin. Afghanistan, what on earth happened and what do we have to worry about next? I'm Christiane Hardy, Interim Director of the Dickey Center. It is my honor to introduce today's discussion on the recent, astonishing, tragic, and ongoing events in Afghanistan. We are fortunate to have three experts whose collective expertise reflect a deep understanding of the conflicts in Afghanistan, of counterterrorism operations, and of regional power dynamics. Our aim today is to better understand the stunningly rapid fall of the Afghanistan government to Taliban forces and the chaotic withdrawal of American, allied, and affiliated personnel. Our panelists will also parse the potential next developments emerging from this fraught territory and their implications for American, regional, and global security. No small order. We are joined today, first of all, by my co-host and president of the American Academy in Berlin, Daniel Benjamin. Dan served as ambassador at large and coordinator for counterterrorism at the US Department of State from 2009 to 2012. He has written extensively on US foreign policy, terrorism, and international affairs. He is the co-author of The Age of Sacred Terror and The Next Attack, The Failure of the War on Terror and a Strategy for Getting It Right, two books that deal squarely with the challenges the world faces with jihadist forces operating in Afghanistan and other places. Prior to joining the American Academy in Berlin, Dan served as my predecessor here at the Dickey Center at Dartmouth, and it is a pleasure, as always, to be collaborating today. Ambassador Benjamin will guide our discussion with two additional experts. Joining us from Dartmouth College is Jason Lyle, the James Wright Chair of Transnational Studies and Associate Professor of Government. He brings a wealth of both on-the-ground experience and deep study into violent organizations to our discussion. Professor Lyle directs the Political Violence Field Lab at the Dickey Center, a program that examines the effectiveness of violence in civil and conventional wars. He is currently at work on two projects, one examining how to improve humanitarian assistance in fragile and conflict settings like Afghanistan, the other on the relationship between inequality, racism, and intergroup relations in violent settings, including police forces, armies, and rebel organizations. Lyle is the author of Divided Armies, Inequality and Battlefield Performance in Modern War, and his research has been published in the American Journal of Political Science, the Journal of Conflict Resolution, the Journal of Peace Research, and many others. He has conducted field work in Russia, Qatar, and most significantly for our discussion, in Afghanistan, where he served as the technical advisor for USAID's Measuring the Impact of Stabilization initiatives from 2012 to 2015. Last year, he was named an Andrew Carnegie Fellow. Offering essential regional and diplomatic perspective is Martin Kobler, a career diplomat from Germany who served as that country's ambassadors to Iraq and Egypt, and most recently to Pakistan. He acquired firsthand knowledge of Afghanistan in 2010-2011 while serving with the United Nations as the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General for the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. He went to Iraq from 2011 to 2013 as Special Representative of the Secretary General for the UN Assistance Mission there, before serving in similar roles with the UN Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of Congo and with the UN Support Mission in Libya. From that position in 2017, he concluded his diplomatic career as Germany's ambassador to Pakistan, retiring in 2019. Gentlemen, welcome to you all. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. What terrific perspectives each of you bring to our discussion. We have a ton of ground to cover today, so I'd like to turn the proceedings over to my colleague, Daniel Benjamin, who will get us started. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much, Chris, for that characteristically great introduction. And it's really a pleasure to be able to collaborate on this program. We are, of course, in what in Germany is known as the Sommerloch, the same thing in America, the August when nothing is supposed to happen. And of course, something quite big happened. And I'm delighted that we could put this together on such short notice and bring our two institutions together. I really want to thank our panelists for joining us. This is a wonderfully cosmopolitan group bringing together a Canadian scholar, a German diplomat and a former US official. And I really want to thank our audience for joining us on such short notice. Just a quick roadmap. I will ask both of our panelists for their impressions and their first thoughts based on their particular expertise. I'll make some comments myself on the implications for terrorism as I see them. And then we will have a discussion, and then about 2/3 of the way through, half of the way through or so, we'll open up to Q&A. You can start sending in your questions, as I see someone already has, right now into the Q&A function on your Zoom screen. Don't be shy. We're happy to get to as many questions as we can. Don't raise your hand or anything else, because we have no facility for calling on you or for live intervention, but I'll get to as many questions as I can. Again, Jay, thank you. Martin, thank you for joining us. Jay, you have had an extraordinary amount of on-the-ground experience in Afghanistan. You've been going there for years. Tell us, in your view, should we have been surprised? What exactly happened on the ground? The collapse that we saw in Afghanistan, I think, is going to be recalled as one of the most extraordinary events in certainly in American foreign policy history, but also in world events. We have seen countries collapse before, we have seen takeovers, but something that happened really in a matter of weeks with the Taliban offensive beginning on May 1, I'm sorry, on July 1, I believe, and then culminating in the August 15 fall of Kabul, was just absolutely stunning. So what is the story behind the story here?
Great. So we're going to start with the easy questions first, I see.
Right.
And well, let me just thank Dana and Chris for putting together this, particularly on such short notice and with such a fast-moving series of events. You know, just to answer your question and kick us off, should we be surprised about the fall of the government in Kabul? Yes and no. And I don't want to sound too much like an academic and a wishy-washy yes and no, but on the no side, you know, it's not really a surprise that the Afghan government's been in trouble for the better part of a decade. My very first trip to Afghanistan was in 2009. I was embedded with the US military at headquarters in Kabul. And there was a deep sense of concern, of pessimism, that the ship was sinking and it needed to be righted very quickly. You know, there was a lot of signs, right? The Afghan government was overly centralized, wasn't very inclusive these last 10 years, very corrupt. High rates of desertion in the Afghan army are not a new phenomena. They've been there ever since the Afghan army was stood up. So a lot of the warning signs were there. That said, I think the surprise is really on the speed of the movement of the Taliban. And in particular, I think analysts right now are focusing on that 3-day period between August 12th and August 15th, where the last remaining cities were rolled up and then basically moving unopposed into Kabul. I think this, I don't care who you are, this is a surprise. In fact, how quickly the Taliban were able to do this. And I think not just the speed, but how relatively bloodless it was. And I think a lot of analysts, particularly since the Doha Agreement in February 2020, got caught watching the wrong indicators. Newspapers were reporting about Taliban violence against the United States, and there was very little. It looked like the deal was holding. But the Taliban had shifted onto the Afghan forces, right? And we're steadily isolating them, degrading their forces, and moving, even as they're negotiating, and then after the negotiations, to isolate and basically crush the ANA in place. And so again, you know, this sort of movement by the Taliban, we were looking at the wrong indicators, right? We were not looking at things like side deals between regional leaders and the Taliban. We were not looking at separate pieces and truces that were breaking out all across the countryside. We were looking at violence against the United States, and that was just simply the wrong indicator. So again, we were surprised, but in part it was of our own making, and we were just looking at the wrong things. And then the final denouement, just the last 3 days, that was shocking. I mean, I think worst case estimates I saw had Kabul lasting 6 months to a year. And I think that helps explain why the United States was caught flat-footed trying to get people out of the airport at Kabul. The fact that it would have happened within 2 weeks or even that last 3 days, I think almost no one anticipated. Even longtime watchers, I think, were surprised by this.
So just to follow up briefly, and we can talk about this more later, the capitulation, if you will, of the Afghan National Forces seems simply not to have been on anyone's radar screens, and the deals that the side deals that you referred to. Were those going on essentially from the smallest units to the largest units? And how could we have missed so dramatically the state of that military? It kind of beggars the imagination.
Yeah, and I'm to be honest, I'm not sure we did miss it. Maybe at the higher levels, but I know a lot of reports. Sigar had his annual reports, his quarterly reports. Yelling from the rooftops that the Afghan National Army was composed mostly of ghost soldiers, had all kinds of tribal and ethnic cleavages, desertion rates. I mean, to me, one of the most telling clues is that around 2013, the U.S. government classified the desertion rate out of the Afghan army. And to me, that's a telling indicator that they were having a huge problem just holding soldiers in. They weren't being paid. They were taking the weapons and changing sides. The side deals really started picking up in 2016. For that, by 2016, the Afghan government had largely ceded the countryside to the Taliban. A lot of local commanders were isolated. They couldn't get supplies. They couldn't get fuel or water. Many of the roads had been cut off. So they were left to their own devices out there. And many of these leaders, understandably, either made side deals or agreed to just surrender their posts. And I think United States also missed it because the drawdown was so quick that as the US was leaving, its ability to see the countryside is diminished and its ability to actually figure out what's going on. And so by 2020, when the presence is actually quite low and then accelerating out, the United States, I think, has very little idea what's happening in the countryside. It's dependent on a few people in Kabul to tell them what's going on. And maybe they had rose-colored glasses about what was going on or had their interests in saying that the Afghan army was going well. But desertion wasn't a new problem. The side deals wasn't a new problem. And it just accelerated near the end stakes as nobody wanted to be the last unit to fight. And everybody cascaded and withdrew. So we should have known that this is a likely scenario.
And again, the side deals would essentially be the Taliban coming to a unit and saying, we can kill you, or you can cut a deal with us, hand over your weapons, and we'll let you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the keys to the rapid movement has been a general amnesty on the ground for soldiers and police who fought against the Taliban. And there's a question of how credible that is, and then I think the coming weeks and months will dictate that. But for the most part, if you surrendered peaceably, the Taliban let you go or gave you an opportunity to side switch and join the Taliban. Right. The units that held in and fought, and there were units that did fight, and the commandos in particular fought hard, and when they surrendered, they were typically executed. So there was a message to the other ones watching those units saying, well, you can fight and die, or you can give up and you're in a hopeless situation anyway. So most of the units gave up and sort of filtered away.
Okay, Martin, turning to you. First of all, thanks again for joining us. I know you're on vacation, although your vacation home looks very office-like. You and I have exchanged emails in which you expressed a great deal of anger at what happened, and I was wondering if you could give us your reaction, your thoughts on the rapidity of the collapse, and also, the view from 35,000 feet about what this does to the region, with the U.S. Out and apparently out for good, or soon to be out for good. And, we are in a sense watching, in a geopolitical sense, the segue from an America focused on counterterrorism, on an occupation or a foreign presence that it was at best half-heartedly engaged in, and a new period of great power rivalry. So I'm sure you have lots of thoughts, and I hope you'll share them with us.
Yeah, thank you very much for arranging these meetings, Dan and colleagues here. Now, I was pretty furious at the beginning, and this gave way a little bit to frustration, and so the emotions cleared in a way. And there are mainly 3 points I would like to make. The first one is the miserable crisis management, or the crisis mismanagement we have at the time being. You see, I agree with all those who say, well, we were all surprised that it was coming within 11 days. But does it really make a difference whether it's 11 days or 60 days, as the CIA or the American services predicted? When Trump said, listen, I will go withdraw without conditions, it was clear to everybody 2-3 years ago. I've spoken to Khalil Saad about it. You see, if you withdraw unilaterally, like we have examples of it, the Israelis withdrew unilaterally from Lebanon, from Gaza, so without getting something for it, without getting a guarantee or so they just have to wait. So it was clear for quite some time that the Taliban will take over, and everybody knew, of course, on the spot. So the anger about the crisis management results from the fact that we really knew about the Taliban takeover. Since 3 months, we have seen Mazar-e-Sharif and Kunduz falling at our German local staff from the Consulate General and GIZ and development agencies. We were unable to evacuate them from there. And already Friday before the fall, I mean, it was, we had the assessment still that Kabul will last another 2 months or something like this, yeah, or another 2 weeks. But at the end, it doesn't matter whether it's 11 days or 60 days, yeah. It was clear, the Menentekel was on the wall, that the Taliban will take over and Kabul will fall. That Ashraf Ghani fled the country so fast, and Jay said quite a lot about the Afghan army. Also this, I think everybody knew. Now, the wishful thinking that the worst possible cases do not materialize, I think this was the main mistake. I mean, after a professional life in foreign service with the UN, I learned that in the Middle and the Far East, no, not the Middle, let's say the Near and Middle East, if you have different scenarios, and you calculate with this, you act on the basis of the scenarios, and you have an optimistic, a middle, and a pessimistic. Imagine what is going to materialize. It's in 80% of the cases the pessimistic scenario. It's in the Middle East, it's Israel, Palestine, it's Libya, it's Lebanon, everywhere. So 80% materializes the pessimistic scenario, and we should have known. Now we are in the middle of election campaign in Germany, and this is a topic now. And our foreign minister, just now I read, he already acknowledged that we will not be able to take all our local staff who helped us throughout these years out. Now, the second point of frustration is, I must say, sorry to say, it's the transatlantic relationship. I mean, our philosophy always was, after 2001, together in, together out. It was very badly coordinated. I would not say we learned it from the newspapers, but we should have known with the 14th of April speech of President Biden that this will come. Now we are in August. We are 24th of August today, and this was 4 months ago. Also here, wishful thinking, maybe he doesn't mean it like this, but we have seen it on the wall that this unilateral withdrawal was coming, and President Biden was following the line of President Trump to withdraw from Afghanistan without conditions, to take the boys home, which had consequences for ourselves. Now, this, what we thought in 2001 is a demonstration of solidarity with Americans after 9/11, ended in a non-solidarity withdrawal for us. Now, I don't blame the Americans for this. My anger goes more against the Europeans. We have been neglecting for the last 20 years to build up a structure that we alone could secure Kabul airport. Now we have the 31st of August deadline that American forces will withdraw and abandon the airport, maybe at the G7 meeting, which is taking place now. They will decide to have a few, or President Biden will agree to have a few days longer, but it doesn't make a difference. I mean, we were so dependent on American forces. that we really neglected, did not want to build up our own number one strategy and number two military dispositives. I mean, not even to secure in such a situation the airport. Now, the third question of anger is the question of the lack of ability, you see, within these 20 years to readjust our position. Always to be dependent on the American position, the reassessment whether really our policy is correct or whether we should readjust and maybe draw the conclusion to leave 10 years ago. I must say in 2001, I was chief of staff of Joschka Fischer, the then foreign minister of Germany, when we did this Petersburg conference and the unconditional solidarity of the chancellor then after 9/11. However, I must say, not only in hindsight, but also at that time, we had an uneasy feeling of what was happening. Given the past of Afghanistan, the history of Afghanistan, the graveyard of nations, the British, the Soviets, whatever, we already in 2001 said yes, and I'm still today saying it was without alternative to prove the solidarity. So that was the right decision. But within 2 decades, we missed the opportunity to reassess both regionally and national our positions. So we went in and we just stayed and we followed the American philosophy and the American strategy. And even in June this year, well, in kind of a Bundestag debate of the opposition to reassess our strategy was blocked by the ruling parties. So, bottom line, it was really a multi-organ, as somebody said, a multi-organ failure in German politics. The question also that now in the election campaign, of course, everybody says we all were surprised. I mean, we were not all surprised. I mean, it's a deflection. There is no responsibility. Everybody says multi-organ failure. It did not fall from heaven, this multi-organ failure. I mean, if you have differences of opinion between ministries of Interior, Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and it's the Chancellor who is calling for a meeting and saying, listen, we have to take the guys out. Where are the charter planes? And she did it, but however, with not very much insistence and just let it drift, the whole situation. Now, the question of responsibility and the reassessment, also with the consequences for the ongoing mission is on the table then for after elections. Now, then you asked about the regional component. Coming back from the UN to a national assignment as ambassador in Afghanistan, and by the way, I was posted in India also in the 90s, early 90s, and spent 3 years in India. It was flabbergasting to see that the regional approach of the UN was not reflected in the bilateral, in the Foreign Office. I thought from the beginning that the AFPAC construction was a wrong one. Now, if you want to have the 35,000 feet view, the AFPAC, just to have Afghanistan and Pakistan together with neglecting the Pakistani-Indian conflict, I think it was a mistake right from the beginning. And I know, or I read at least, that that Holbrooke just wanted to include India also. I mean, you see, I don't want to say that solving the Kashmir conflict would have made it better. However, to work on Indian-Pakistani improvement of relations. At the same time, this was an imperative right from the beginning. Instead, we had Afghanistan and Pakistan. And by the way, I must say, I'm not naive on the role of the ISI. However, we always failed to take the Pakistani into the boat. During my tenure in Pakistan, I felt it all the time. Yeah, of course, there was an ISI role with Haqqani, whom to my disgust I have seen on the markets of Kabul the other day. However, we pushed the Afghanis in a role that they are the spoilers, and we built up, well, or we at least agreed to have the Indians having a substantial presence also in Afghanistan with $1 billion developments. And this put Pakistan, of course, in a position that they had two fronts, and 2/3 during my time, at least until 2 years ago, 2/3 of the Pakistani army was along the Afghan border, not at the border of the perceived enemy India. Now, to have this whole setup regionally, I mean, I don't talk about Iran at this stage. However, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India, I think this was a basic mistake at the beginning. The US, of course, needed Pakistan for logistics. However, during my time, you didn't even have an ambassador. The Americans didn't even have an ambassador in Pakistan. Now, and at the beginning, one could have brought, maybe, I don't know, but we didn't even try. We could have brought the Pakistanis on board, which would, I think, have made our life quite easy and not fight against them. At the end of the day, Pakistan, this was my clear impression, will never tolerate a hostile regime in Kabul, come what may. Whether we like it or not, it's realpolitik. I mean, these presidents, Karzai and Ashraf Ghani, they were blaming Pakistan for everything, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They were attacking them. Do not expect a proud nation like Pakistan to accept this. They have their interests of using Afghanistan as a hinterland, providing them the security because their perceived confrontation will be on the other side of their border. Now, I mean, I stop here, but I do hope when we come then to the evaluation and to the way forward, that we are going to reassess also this regional component. Over to you.
Well, there's a lot more to talk about on that issue of, the AFPAC construction. I think there was widely a sense that it was flawed from the outset. You mentioned Richard Holbrooke's opposition to it. It's worth noting that in that early period, the Indians also said, this is not, we refuse to be part of this construction. It might have been wiser to have only had a special envoy for Afghanistan and thereby leave some more constructive ambiguity, if you will, about what that envoy was going to do, but that the AFPAC construction certainly did cause a problem. So I want to ask you both a bit of a hypothetical, which, but it's one that I think that is very much on the minds of many in the audience, which is, okay, so President Biden essentially took over the deal that President Trump had negotiated. He changed the deadlines a bit. Was this, in your view, the original sin, well, shall we say the short-term original sin, and should there have been an effort to force the Taliban to negotiate further in Doha with the first of all, to bring in the Afghan government, but also with us to say we're not leaving until we have these assurances about what's going to happen next in Afghanistan. And was, first of all, was that would that have been a realistic approach? Or would, as the White House has claimed, would that have resulted in more violence against Americans? In fact, in effect, the end of the truce, of the ceasefire that had kept Americans out of harm's way. So, which of you would like to go first? Jay, how about you?
I was about to defer to the diplomat on this one, but I can take a shot. I mean, hypotheticals are hard. My sense is that Biden and his administration had no interest in renegotiating anything. I think that they were ready to go. They were ready to work within the framework that Trump set up. I think the original sin at Doha was not having the Afghan national government at the table. So it delegitimized the Afghan government and gave the Taliban a quite credible diplomatic victory for very little cost. And so I don't know where the off-ramp is once Doha is set in motion. There's just was no stomach, I think, on this administration to put more troops in, to roll back some of the Taliban gains. The Taliban were very calibrated in their violence. They were not attacking American forces, and so they gave the United States a clear sort of runway to leave. I don't know. I just don't think this administration was interested in finding a way to stop this. And I think I agree with Martin. You know, I have anger too. I mean, I have friends that are stuck outside the airport of Kabul right now. I think this ending was foreseeable and badly mismanaged. That said, it's not clear what the toolkit that Biden had to actually reverse much of this once it was set in motion, short of putting more troops on the ground. And the big thing I would just say in terms of, you know, trying to have diplomacy, and there was very little coercive leverage left for the United States. And once it drew down its airfields in Kandahar and then finally in Bagram, it had very little in-country assets to be able to do anything coercively to the Taliban. And if you look at where the Taliban offensives are timed, there's a May offensive, sort of phase 1, where they take about 50 district centers. That coincides almost exactly with the shuttering of Kandahar airfield. And then there's a ramp up in July. That coincides almost exactly with the shutting down of Bagram airfield. And so I don't know where the hypothetical is. It's just in the sense that Biden, I don't think, wanted to get off this peace deal. And I don't know where the leverage would have been to try and force the Taliban into, you know, honoring some of the agreements. Or, I mean, once the United States said the Ghani administration isn't at the table, you kind of set this up for failure, I think.
Right. Well, I certainly agree with you on your assessment of the administration's desire to shut down operations in Afghanistan early in the president's new term. I guess the question I'm asking is whether or not the collapse might have been forestalled, and we might have done a better job in delaying the onslaught and getting our people out if we had held tight a bit longer. Martin, what do you think?
Well, you see, I thought for quite some time, maybe many, many years, that I told you that already in 2001, we had our doubts that we could win this war militarily. So to withdraw once the counterterrorism aims are reached. This was within 2 years, yeah. But then we should have thought thinking about withdrawing already, let's say 15 or 10 years ago. Now, there were 2 reasons I see which prevented us from doing this. And this was very strange for me, and also a reason for frustration. I had many delegations. We were flying to other cities, German parliamentarians, European parliamentarians with the UN, and everybody who was looking out of the airplane saying, listen, what the hell, how can we win the war? Now, whoever has seen the rugged mountains, the Hindu Kush, the geography of the country, and then landed in Mazar or in Kunduz or in Kandahar or wherever, where there was a street life and at least, well, a kind of island of stability, yeah, but wondered at the end, was this really the right decision? But this was already, when I was in Afghanistan, 2010, 11, everybody tacitly or really outspoken said this. These parliamentarians coming back, they always voted for the extension of the mandate. So I asked myself why. And we have to look at the embellished reporting of everybody, NATO member states, NATO itself, Germans. When I was in Pakistan, we had elections. So I was reading all the reports of, and you see the last elections, yes, there were flaws, there were security problems. In brackets, 4,000 polling stations could not be opened. Yeah. However, yes, there were minor flaws in the electoral process. However, the country is on the right way to stability, recognition of human rights, and. This has been for many, many years the gist of the reporting in NATO. When I'm talking to military on the ground, the German military, they say, well, we majors from the PRTs or wherever we are sitting, the FOBs, we reported the real things. However, when the reports came back and we have seen the final version, we have seen what the generals in between or the hierarchy changed. We could not recognize it. Now, on the basis of these embellished reportings, the ministers are going to the Defense Committee, Foreign Affairs Committee, they are briefing, oh, well, yes, there are problems. Yes, we have now resurgence of the Taliban, but at the end it will be fine. And on this basis, parliamentarians extend the mandate. And this was going on for many, many years. Reason number two, we were not only preventing bad governance, we were supporting bad governance with corruption. And this was very clear right from the beginning. Now, if you kickstart such an operation of nation building, you close your eyes on many things. Yeah. However, after 2-3 years, you cannot close your eyes on corruption that government elite of the country are taking hundreds of millions of dollars out of the country in Safia airplanes or wherever, buying property in London or in Dubai or wherever, and think then that this goes unpunished at the end. Now, the revenge came later. The revenge is coming now. Why should an Afghan army, the side talks and it's something else, but why should they defend an elite which is supposed to fall because of corruption? Now, we never stopped it. We never insisted on good governance. And I think this was one of the long-term reasons the defense organizations like the ANA and the police were saying, well, I mean, do we really want to support these guys and defend it? Now, these were two reasons. But you put also another question. I forgot now. Well, no, let's stop here then.
Sure. So I just wanted to follow up on your remarks about the famous Petersburg conference, which I believe was 2001, may have carried into 2002, about the formation of a new Afghan government. I don't want to dwell on ancient history, but your view was that, and you mentioned skepticism at the time, that as long as the Taliban, which at that point was, so morally tainted that it couldn't be included in the talks, but as long as the Taliban wasn't included in the talks, it was ultimately a colonial expedition and we were occupying a country and would come to a bad end. Is that the correct interpretation of your views?
Yeah. Now, I think we channeled the idea with the Americans in Petersburg. We were not in the driver's seat, however, we were the hosts. So we had the right to channel some ideas, and to have the Taliban included, this of course was a no-go for the US, because these were the enemies who had to be crushed. Now, a decade later, and now I come back to your question, I got it back, we backed the Taliban in Doha on knees to come to an agreement. But now with which strategy? There are those who say, well, the Taliban changed within 20 years. And this talk of moderate Taliban. Now, I never believed really in the concept of moderate Taliban. I believe in the concept of tactically wise Taliban who give interviews to women for a day, but the lady was blocked then from the TV station the next day. Yeah. However, tactically, yes, but not mentally. And who tells me? That was the question I always asked also the intelligence people. I never got an answer. Who tells me that a new generation of 30 years old Taliban are now suddenly moderate because they are tired of war? Why isn't, at least should we have thought about that they are even more radical because they know nothing else than war? Now, the moderate Taliban is a wishful thinking you can work with. If you are not naive, there might be a chance they are moderate, but there might also be a chance that they are more radical. And the US wanted to conclude a deal, and as we said, did not have strings attached. Now, what could the strategy have been? I hear nothing about the UN at the time being. I hear nothing from the UN or whatever. I mean, but to have, if you come to a deal that with the Taliban, transitional government, getting, or human rights standards, getting girls to school at least for 6 years, and so who is going to monitor it? Now, the UNAMA always had a role of supporting ISAF and supporting the traditional scheme. However, to reinvent a UN role also in Doha, also with military observers, yeah, and then to face them in and face the others out, I do not know what's realistic, but at least it would have been an idea to get, and who else apart from the UN could do it? No national, no coalition of the willing. However, the UN who was complicit during the last years to the because of their mandate, they had to follow the rules and their mandate. However, to reinvent the UN, to give them a new role as monitors of what was agreed. This was, I think, never really thought of. Yeah, and maybe this would have been a way. However, given the theory that I have my doubts about the moderate Taliban, maybe also this would be a concept which would not have been successful.
So I promised that I would make some comments on counterterrorism, but before I do, Jay, moderate Taliban, is there a new Taliban? I worry, taking off from Martin's remarks, that the search for the moderate Taliban is 2021's answer to the 25 years we spent looking for moderates in Tehran. What's your view? Is there a chance that there will be a more moderate Taliban? And do you agree, and we'll get to this in the counterterrorism a bit, but do you agree that the Taliban is more likely to be moderate if there isn't a civil war going on in which it feels like it's being opposed by the United States and its allies?
Yeah, that's a great question. I agree with Martin. I just don't see a moderate Taliban. I know firsthand going into some of these districts that are controlled by young, almost teenage level commanders, typically more radical than the older generation. Again, not much education, knowing mostly war, became much more unpredictable, for example, for us to work in these areas. And so I think the moderate Taliban is mostly an illusion. Where I would agree with Martin is the sort of tactically savvy Taliban. And I think it extends not just to interviews with women or giving a little bit of concessions perhaps on girls' education, which is one area where you might see it. I'm just trying to watch how the Taliban are thinking about forming their government. And there is talk now of being a more inclusive Taliban. So you may see in the coming government Tajiks and Uzbeks who are in maybe figurehead roles or symbolic roles, but nonetheless are a sign of a more moderate, more ethnically inclusive Taliban. You may see there's talk now that the finance minister may be more pro-Western Taliban, just in the sense that they need somebody to interact with the West and potentially get funds. But is this a sign of a deep change in what the Taliban believe? No. I think they're tactically savvy. They're very good on social media. They are projecting an image right now in how they are governing Kabul. We don't know what's happening outside of Kabul, so I think that's maybe where the real Taliban is. So I think right now it's early days. It's very media savvy Taliban, but I do not think it has changed its stripes. And I think the moderate Taliban is mostly an illusion. Of course, I do agree. I think there'll be more moderate if there isn't a civil war going on. And those two are connected. I think right now for the Taliban, they have to figure out how much power do they want to centralize. If they try and centralize all in their hands and not have an inclusive government, you may get the North and the West, who are typically Tajik and Uzbek and typically anti-Taliban, may push back and may resist some of these side deals or renounce some of the side deals that they brokered. So it's in the Taliban's interest to be tactically savvy, to bring in a more of an inclusive, at least nominally, government. But I agree with Martin. I don't think you're going to see a moderate Taliban in any real measure.
So let me just throw out a few hypotheses for you on the future of Afghanistan as a locus of terrorist activity. There has been a lot in the press that Al-Qaeda will come back, it will regenerate, and it will use Afghanistan as a base for attacking the United States and its Western partners. Let's begin by saying the Taliban has never really broken with Al-Qaeda, although it has promised to or indicated it would in a number of different circumstances, including in Doha. But at the same time, I would really caution against the kind of fearfulness and hyperventilation, I think, that characterized a lot of certainly the first 10 years of the global war on terror, and to some extent, the years after, especially until Donald Trump's presidency essentially took the war on terrorism off the front page of the newspapers and out of the TV, because most of the reporters were reassigned to cover scandals involving the new president. So my own view is that the Al-Qaeda may in fact return to Afghanistan in some way and enjoy a safe haven there. However, first of all, the United States woke up on 9/11 to a threat that it had not been awake to or not been conscious of in a really serious sense before. And if our authorities are doing their job, there's no possibility, I think, that we will go back to sleep again. I am concerned that jihadist terrorism didn't get a lot of attention in the first 6, 7, 8 months of the new administration. But I'd like to think that the machinery of the intelligence community and the military and law enforcement have continued to work. Even if Al-Qaeda regenerates in Afghanistan to some extent, we are not going to be completely blind. It will be more difficult to collect intelligence there, although there are going to be a number of people who can probably be signed up as intelligence assets. We've made enormous technological advances in terms of our ability to collect from signals intelligence, communications that is, and to get visual intelligence from drones overhead. And I think that will continue. I think the most important fact in all this is that for Afghanistan to be a place where Al-Qaeda can work and carry out conspiracies against the so-called far enemy in the West, it has to be able to reconstitute its international networks, which have been really battered by 20 years of very effective law enforcement and intelligence work. And without those networks, which had been well articulated and developed in the period before 9/11, the terrorism threat remains manageable. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to be able to stop every attack. We can never stop every attack, but the possibility of a catastrophic attack that involves really elaborate planning and quite a number of operatives, it seems to me is still a low probability, and that if we learned anything during the last 20 years, it should be that we don't allow our entire foreign policy and security policy to be consumed by counterterrorism, that we have lots of excellent tools at our disposal, including very good border controls that have developed over the years. And this is true not just in the US, but in Europe as well, even though those borders are much more difficult to police. And that the art of doing counterterrorism in the future is going to require being, on the one hand, vigilant, and on the other hand, restrained. In other words, not letting ourselves be carried away by the belief that we're facing an imminent threat and therefore need to carry on a sort of open-ended expeditionary campaign involving our military, which will only cause further radicalization, as we saw, for example, in Iraq, the most misbegotten undertaking in American foreign policy history. So I leave it to the two of you. Martin, did you have any thoughts on that? Am I being overly optimistic?
I'm not a anti-terrorism expert, but the 80%, 20% rule, you see, I better would plan for the negative scenario that they're able to reconstitute. Of course, we all hope that the Taliban, which are mainly not an international terrorist organization. Yeah, they want to have an emirate within the borders, and they do not want to have a recurrence of 9/11 here. Yeah, so I think they would be much more cautious now to host Al-Qaeda or structures on their territory, because they are not internationally oriented towards the international world.
Yeah, I would agree with the sort of reasonable view that you put forward. I think the Taliban have managed to seize power. I think they're unlikely to sort of just turn it over to Al-Qaeda and say, here's your base, and begin attacking the United States. I certainly do think there are connections between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, absolutely. But the one thing that the United States has in its leverage, not just these counterterrorism tools, which I agree are going to be degraded now. There's still maybe some human intelligence. There are some technical solutions potentially, but they will be degraded. The big lever the United States has is still economic assistance. Right, this is something that the Taliban are desperately going to need, and part of the question of the panel is what are the things we're worried about. I'm actually much more worried about economic collapse and refugee flows than I am about a terrorism threat right now. And so I think the United States is probably going to have to live with some Al-Qaeda presence, a sanctuary inside Afghanistan. I think the Taliban are going to watch Al-Qaeda quite closely and monitor their activities in there, and I think it's going to be sort of a manageable threat kind of going forward.
Yeah.
Then if I may add one additional point, we shouldn't forget that the whole presence of the internationals, we were considered occupiers. Yeah, I mean, the pictures now on TV are different. Everybody fleeing, going to the airport, wanting to get out of the country. However, we have been considered and are considered occupiers. Now, if we don't learn this lesson that foreign involvement also with aid and others, aid agencies or intelligence, CIA, is not considered an occupying kind of force, so we would be mistaken. We should learn this lesson. And in the future, I'm a little bit afraid, we have spoken about the Tajiks and the Turkmens and the Uzbeks and the ex-Northern Alliance. I'm a little bit afraid that we are going to support those who are fighting the Taliban. So the whole thing will restart. What if the CIA now will support a new Northern Alliance to liberate Mazar and Kunduz and whatever? Yeah. Now, and then the whole story will repeat itself. And we are considered occupiers, and we have been considered occupiers, and this would be another occupying force, so to say. And this might be a reason for the Taliban to admit others to help them on their side. Right. So we should avoid this mistake and not give them this pretext of inviting Al-Qaeda, saying, well, but the CIA is supporting the Uzbeks again, and this is an intrusion, this is a violation of sovereignty, we have to fight back.
I'm glad you brought up the occupation point. One of the things that I have found really remarkable in American coverage of this, and I don't expect you're following that closely, Martin, but Jay, you probably are, is the extent to which American policymakers and people in the blob, in the American policy community have blamed Afghans and Afghan corruption as being the root of the problem, without looking ourselves in the mirror and saying, at the end of the day, other countries just don't like having foreign military on their soil, and that this is ultimately a deeply corrosive thing. We as Americans tend to believe in the benign purposes that we embrace, but at the end of the day, if someone's kicking down your door to look for suspects in the middle of the night, something that, as Jay well knows, you both know, happened an awful lot of times, it really engenders an awful lot of resentment. I see you nodding, Jay.
Yeah, and I would just say it's been somewhat surreal watching American news coverage and seeing the same people who were the architects of the war now defending, their strategies and blaming a lot of the Afghans for failing to fight and things like that. We shouldn't forget how much of this money actually ended back up in the United States in contractor hands. I mean, we had a joke when I was working with USAID that they would ask us, well, how is the aid working on the ground? Is it reducing violence? Is it stabilizing these areas? And we'd say, well, we don't know. And they said, well, why not? And it says, well, because you want to let us evaluate Dubai, because the sense was all the money had gone to Dubai, it had leaked out of the country, and it was not in Afghanistan. And so, the United States is deeply intertwined in this on the corruption side too, not just the sort of military strategy piece as well. And so again, the nightly news have been pretty surreal on this measure.
Yeah, so we have a ton of questions. Some of them I've already been touching on without saying out loud, but let me put some of them to you now. One viewer asks, do you anticipate a Hazara genocide? The Hazaras are the Shia group who live in northern Afghanistan and who have been the targets of Taliban violence in the past. And I would open that up a bit and just say, do we expect, following up on what we've said about the character of the Taliban, do we expect mass human rights violations? Jay, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So I think there's a great question. First of all, I think there's two kind of canaries in the mine shaft right now. One is the treatment of Hazara, and the second is the treatment of women, and in particular, their access to education. My sense is we don't have a moderate Taliban, and so I do expect there to be violence toward the Hazara. There have been some credible reports already of some low-level amounts of violence towards the Hazara. Notably, they have been absent in any of the side deals for the most part. The Taliban inclusion does not seem to reach the Hazara, so I would not be surprised if there was violence toward the Hazara. I don't know if it will reach genocidal levels, but there certainly will be some violence there. And then the women, as part of this puzzle too, I think they're the ones we're going to see in the coming weeks and months how the Taliban decide. So I mean, it's hard to anticipate these things, but if history holds, or if the patterns of history hold, then yes, we will see violence toward the Hazara.
Yeah. Martin, yes, do you want to expand on that, endorse it, or move on?
No, I will endorse it. I will not elaborate on this. Yeah, okay. But given the fact that we should really anticipate a bad scenario, so I would be careful here. Yeah, so I totally agree. We have stated that moderate Taliban is an illusion. So the Shia-Sunni kind of conflict is also reflecting here in Afghanistan.
Another viewer notes that press reporting has indicated that more than 3 in 4 Afghans today are under 25 years old. Historians will tell you demography is fate. How do you think that plays into the dynamics of all these different developments? You want to give that a try, Martin?
Yeah. Now, this is not very different from other countries. Everywhere, 66 to 70% are below the age of 30, and also in Afghanistan. Now, under which conditions were these people socialized? And they were maybe socialized, they were educated. And this was maybe one of the positive sides of the last 20 years, that these young people, that they witnessed war, but on the other side, they are familiar with social media. They are familiar everywhere with education, and they know how the outside world ticks. So this is, I think, a hope. On the other side, you have the trauma everywhere in conflict areas, traumatized people. I witnessed this, you see, many times, and I realized it very late in my work in conflict areas, that the foreign ministers or the elites you are talking to, they are traumatized from their childhood. Now, and you have to take this into consideration also. But in principle, they are better educated. They have access to social media. They have access mentally to the world. So this is a sign of hope.
Yeah. Jay, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think the Taliban are going to find it in some ways harder to govern than they did to fight. And this is going to be one of the big governing challenges. These youth, as Martin said, are connected to the West. They've got cell phones. They're on Facebook, but they want jobs and they want opportunities. Right. And this is going to be something that's very hard for the Taliban to manage if it's going to isolate itself from the world. It has a very different population to govern than the first time it did. And I think this might be the enduring legacy of the occupation is really that you have a much stronger civil society that is young and energetic and not want to be put back in this box. I don't know if that means necessarily violence, but there is going to be a much more of a dialogue between society and the Taliban than I think maybe the first time around there was.
Martin, I have a question on Pakistan. And I think it's an excellent one. The Pakistanis are masters of riding the tiger. And we saw that in the in the decades before 9/11, the Pakistanis supported extremist groups in Kashmir, and that led to radicalization there, and in turn radicalization in Afghanistan, and ultimately it came back to bite them in the TTP, and that is to say the Pakistani Taliban. Is Pakistan now essentially the dog that caught the car? That they've achieved their strategic goals in having a friendly regime in Afghanistan, but risk radicalization at home, and perhaps even a partner in Afghanistan that they may not be able to control in a way they'd want to.
I would say the second remark is true. Of course, it's good for them now. They must feel good that they have a hinterland which is Pakistan friendly, and that they can concentrate on other things like Kashmir or so. But they woke up with the killings of the Pakistani Taliban, and they had all these actions which in the Swat Valley and along the border. They are building the wall now between Pakistan and India. They are also afraid, or they must be afraid, that they cannot control this development. On the other side, many of the Pakistanis, of the Taliban, they have their families in Quetta and in Peshawar. The children are going to school. But this is a double-edged sword. Also, Mullah Baradar was tortured in a Pakistani prison, and now he will become foreign minister. Yeah, so there's not a good kind of relation. So it goes both ways. They are very careful, I think. They have their experience with the Pakistani Taliban, with the killings, with they had their sacrifices with their own army. They were fighting, and a lot of bloodletting of Pakistani army also. So they learned their lessons. On the other side, they are, of course, they must be satisfied that they have a hinterland they can control. This was the target of the ISI for quite some time. And not only of the ISI, also of the military, because they want to concentrate on the other side of their border. And once again, I mean, conflict prevention means addressing conflicts which are on the horizon. And Kashmir is on the horizon. And we are waking up once every 10 years and think, well, we have two nuclear powers and there will be a confrontation. Then everybody talks to everybody, goes back to normal, and the escalation is averted and we go back to business as usual. Maybe we also learn our history then to push the two countries to open their border, to exchange economy. This is good for everybody. I know they are difficult partners, but to open borders, to enter into economic exchange, to enter into civil society exchange between Pakistanis and Indians, this will take the fear away a little bit.
Yeah. So let me follow up on that with a question of my own. When I look at the tableau before us, and I think about the U.S. being out of Afghanistan and the incredibly difficult relationship we've had with Pakistan for so many years, my conclusion is that the U.S. will inevitably move towards, as it has been for quite some time now, will try to move towards a closer relationship with India, particularly because of the challenge that is strongly perceived, in the view of some German critics, overly perceived perhaps, with China. And I'm curious what both of you think about this, and what you think, if you agree with that hypothesis. And obviously the Indians have a say in all this as well, but whether it won't ultimately perhaps be a little destabilizing in the region to not have the US balancing between India and Pakistan. Martin, why don't you start off? This is you're the great game expert.
Well, now, if we speak about lessons learned, I mean, we should all learn the lesson that only a reconciliation between Pakistan and India could solve the problem. And to go to deepen the rift between Pakistan and India is a wrong kind of policy. We have the Chinese-Pakistani economic corridor. Yes, China is on the side of the Pakistanis because they are confronting the Indians in the north. Now, but to play this game, why don't we go to regionalization, to have regional conflict solution? And this always also eases the tensions between the US and China. Why not entering into strategic relations with Pakistan in order also to balance the influence of the Chinese? So to neglect the Pakistanis, to put them in a corner, to stop cooperation with them, not to send an ambassador, increases the influence of China. It's good for whom? Creating win-win situations is the game of the day. Now, entering into strategic relations to Pakistan and with India, not playing one against the other. This would be my recommendation. And also pushing. You see, we Europeans were never able to do it. And that's also one of the reasons of my frustration. Had we Europeans woken up, let's say 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and we had invented, as Europeans, the One Belt, One Road initiative, the Chinese-Pakistani economic corridor would be a European Pakistani economic corridor right now. But now it's a Chinese economic corridor. Question is it too late to change this geostrategic setup? I think no. And Afghanistan, if we draw a lesson from Afghanistan, it is to promote economic cooperation within the region and then to bring the countries together, because this will be a win-win situation and will also be good for, well, US-Chinese relations.
Okay, so that's an excellent response. I asked an analytical question. You gave me a normative answer. So I'm curious, not so much on what should happen, which I agree with you about that. I guess the question is what will happen.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's the same thing we have spoken about with the CIA now. So, I mean, going to support probably the anti-Taliban, probable anti-Taliban coalition with weapons and everything now. This is a lesson not learned. Now, the same thing on the regional, I think, and we also, Europeans are on the same on the same track with our Pakistan policy and India. The Indians are, of course, with 1.3 billion inhabitants, an economic kind of a power not to be neglected, and they are rising, and we are putting our eggs in the ball of in the basket of India. This will happen.
Well, I just wanted to say to whoever wrote in and said, how do you stabilize the region? I think that Martin gave a very good discussion. Jay, did you have anything you wanted to add on this?
Not really, just that you can see how complex the local geography is, and also how unfavorable it is to the United States right now, right? Because we haven't really spoken about Iran being there, and is it going to be a key player? The Russians are involved with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. China is involved now, and none of these are particularly friendly to the United States. And just thinking through, even from a counterterrorism point of view, a very narrow lens to see this, not a lot of friendly countries around to be able to help out with this particular scenario. And so, I mean, you just hope there's a lot of heavy lifting going on behind the scenes that we don't see, that's trying to shape the diplomatic arena for the foreseeable weeks and months, and for even any kind of presence in Afghanistan or over Afghanistan. Because right now it's a very tough neighborhood for the United States, and I don't see it getting better. I mean, I agree with Martin. There may be these initiatives we can try in the future, but in the near term, this is going to be a very tough environment for the United States to operate.
So,
but listen, if I may, why don't we all climb down from our trees of what we have done in the last 20 years? Now, the war is lost in Afghanistan. These are, as you said, Dan, I mean, these photos will remain in the archives of world history. Why isn't this a reason to climb down from the trees and to reassess the situation and to analyze the mistakes? And one of the mistakes, I think, is the lack of reconciliation between India and Pakistan, and address it. Yeah, now it will not happen, I agree. So I'm really pessimistic, but this would be one of the ideas. And in the brainstorming meetings, everybody should have now in the German Foreign Ministry, in the State Department, Ministry of Defense, this should be a topic.
I couldn't agree more. And when I look at the identity politics that the government of India is pursuing, my heart sinks. Let me ask you another question. What do we expect will be Iran's approach to a Taliban-dominated Afghanistan? What are the regional implications there? Jay, do you want to start off on this one?
Sure. Although again, Martin's the expert here, but I would imagine Iran to take a cautious view of the new Taliban, sort of a bit of a wait and see approach. I mean, right now, the big issue is refugees across the border who have been steadily moving across. This has always been an issue with Iran, with Afghans inside Iran and then being pushed back periodically and then coming back again. So I think they have a lot of issues. Iran also has interest in Western Afghanistan, and particularly in Herat, that they're seeking to pursue. I imagine there's a tactical alliance here of some kind that will form, but I don't imagine there's a huge amount of love in Tehran for Kabul right now. And I think they seem to be taking a wait and see attitude about whether they're going to declare the Taliban government legitimate or not. And I think that's sort of everybody's in this waiting game right now of who's going to do it. I imagine they will establish ties. I imagine they'll be frosty, but cordial and in some ways and productive. But I don't think there's a lot of trust between those two sides.
Yeah. Martin?
No, refugee problem is on their plate. I agree with everything you said. Special focus on refugees. There will be refugee streams across the border, as there has always been. Relations to Turkey and relations to Europe, you see, will be more important for them when it comes to Afghanistan. But I agree with the cautious approach. They don't like it. However, there also will not, apart from refugees, a political spillover into Iran.
Right. So, we have had an outstanding audience of nearly 350 and vastly more questions than I was able to get to. I want to ask one question in closing and add my apologies to the audience not being able to get to all of them precisely, although I think we got to the themes with most of them. And that is, the question I have is, what is the long-term impact on the United States and its influence in the world of this catastrophe? Now, the political science literature, Jay, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, suggests that our competitors may look upon this as a heartening embarrassment and failure on the part of the US, and they will certainly want to take advantage of the local decline in influence in Central Asia, but that it will not affect their calculations in terms of when and where they might challenge us. That is just one assertion I want the two of you to deal with. And then the other, Martin, is, and this is for both of you, but Martin, you in particular will have thoughts. What does this do to a transatlantic relationship that was coming back strongly, I would say, in speaking with German diplomats, with your colleagues, there was a great sense of optimism about the future. Clearly, this doesn't reflect well on the competence of our foreign policy. Will it have any lasting impact on the direction and the broad themes of our foreign policy and our ability to pursue them? So who would like to start first? Jay, I started off with reference to political science. You're in that field. You tell us.
Yeah, that's always a dangerous way to end the panel with political science literature, but this may be a contrarian view, and in some ways I hope I'm wrong with this, but I'll put it out there. I don't think the fall of Afghanistan is going to matter a whole lot for the United States foreign policy or its standing in the world. I just think, first of all, the withdrawal is incredibly popular in the United States, right? So like in terms of electoral output, most Americans don't want anything to do with Afghanistan. Most Americans can't find Afghanistan on the map, you know, and so there's a sense of I don't know if this is going to play much at home. I think abroad, you know, there is this potential danger of a credibility hit to the United States, but the United States just sunk $2 trillion into a country that was of marginal national security importance and hung on for a very long time. I don't know if like China or Russia looks at that and says, wow, the United States is a feckless great power and it doesn't have the willpower to stand in. I think it might draw the opposite conclusion, which is that it's going to stand in even if it's bad for its own interests. And so there's a question perhaps of how capable American military strategy is, diplomacy is. I think those are valid questions. But in terms of the American standing in the world, I'm not sure this is going to be a very big hit at all. I just don't see other countries now coming to the conclusion that the U.S. commitment isn't necessarily credible. I think it's popular at home. It's not going to play bad there. And most Europeans, I think, are already deeply skeptical of the United States. And I don't know if this hurts the credibility anymore. I may be totally wrong. And it may be that adversaries are emboldened by this. But I just don't see China and Russia taking this and saying, okay, now the United States is weak, we should seize on these advantages. I just don't think that's the lesson from Afghanistan.
Martin?
Well, I see it a little bit differently because you see, there was a sigh of relief after Trump and with the election victory of Biden. And this was a European trauma, that we really were afraid that NATO Article 5, is just on paper. Now, there will not be a kind of political situation now we should be afraid of. However, this close relation with the US under Trump, the image was really bad, and there was this sigh of relief. Now we have seen with Biden, 14th of April, without consulting everybody who went together in with the United States, that you are leaving. And these images you see of abandoning, first of all, intelligence failure. And I, with Joschka Fischer, was attending the Security Council meeting on Iraq, you say, way back with Colin Powell, who had his anthrax thing with him. This sticks in your mind. Yeah, there was nothing. And now we have this kind of intelligence failure again, also our own, but also the American. But this is maybe not so important. However, the strategic relations, can we really rely on the Americans also in future? This is something we have to assess. And the only consequence can be a stronger Europe. And here I'm very pessimistic. We have been praying this, and others, and political scientists, and the Munich Security Conference, and Ischinger, and who else? Yeah, to make Europe stronger. However, this did not happen in the last decades. Now, I really do hope also here we are having with our new government then a push of having a stronger integration, also military integration. Not to say we should replace the Americans in being a world police power, because there's also a discussion that we now realize that we cannot, by military means, transmit our values to other nations. We have to come back to realpolitik here. Many will say it's unethical, yeah, and of course we have our values. However, this cannot be done with military power. Now, to make Europe stronger now, really, and we should take it as a lesson. I'm afraid, however, it will be business as usual once the immediate crisis is over.
Yeah, I was going to say the likely next chancellor has declared this NATO's biggest failure in all of its history. And he's going to, those words will be repeated to him if he indeed does become chancellor and when the next crisis happens. So it's an interesting, enormously challenging situation, but I want to thank the two of you for illuminating it brilliantly, I would say, and for joining us. We only have Chris's avatar up on the screen right now, but I want to thank her and the Dickey Center again for being great collaborators. I hope that we can perhaps revisit some of these issues a few months down the road. Martin, I look forward to seeing you in Berlin. Jay, I look forward to seeing you in Norwich, Vermont, and thank you so much, and thanks to all the audience for joining us. This has been a terrific exchange. Thank you very much, and let's hope for some good outcomes in the very near term for the evacuation of Western nationals and the Afghans who have played such an important role in the Western presence in Afghanistan. All the best to you.